All right, so it's November 9th, and we are calling to order the meeting of the New York State Athletic Commission. I'm going to turn over the agenda to Tony.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. We have 3 members today. We have a quorum for our meeting. First item of item on the agenda is the review and acceptance of the minutes from the meeting of August 31st of 2016. That should be the first item after the agenda in your packets.
I read it. I make a motion to accept it.
Motion to
Second.
approve the minutes have been made by Commissioner Signorelli.
Second.
Judge Torres seconded the motion. All in favor of approving the minutes from August 31st, please say aye.
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 Opposed? And motion carries and minutes are approved. The next item on the agenda is the discussion and approval of the medical emergency action plan. And this was brought to the second item on the behind that. Next item on the right-hand side of your packet. This action plan was brought to the MAB and approved by the Medical Advisory Board last week. And I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Gagliardi, who can talk about how it was developed. The provenance of it is the recommendation in the Inspector General's report for an emergency action plan. That's the Inspector General's report from July of 2016. Dr. Gagliardi?
So basically what this document does is it outlines everyone's role in the event that there's an emergency. So, it clearly delineates what each person must do and focus on, and also outlines their chain of communication. So there's no chaos and everything gets, done appropriately. We have a couple different scenarios if there's an emergency in the ring or the cage, depending on the type of setup that we have in an event. We have a plan that follows, an emergency action from that point. And also if there's any emergency that might occur, not only in the back where the locker rooms may be or our triage area, but also in any peripheral location along the path of the travel or the route on which the fighters, combatants will travel. So this is, like I said, an outline of that, and it's based on all the players that will be present at an event.
This was developed. I think Commissioner Signorelli might have been on one of the task force or work groups that worked on this. There was a work group put together to work on the emergency action plan and develop it. We've shared it with the Inspector General's office. Our physicians have seen it, and of course the Medical Advisory Board has seen it. It should be a living and breathing document. I mean, it's going to be tested for the first time, hopefully, with your approval on Saturday night, and we'll follow these procedures and we'll make the appropriate adjustments as needed, depending on how things work out. Questions?
No.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the emergency action plan?
Make a motion to approve. Very good.
Commissioner Signorelli, Commissioner Torres seconds, and all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. And the emergency action plan will be put into place. Next item on the agenda is discussion and approval of revised medical forms as recommended by the MAB. And there are 4 different forms. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Gagliardi again. But before I do that, again, these were there was an IG investigation that the forms we were using be improved. We've looked at forms that are a standard template that the Association of Ringside Physicians uses and recommends to state commissions. We've taken that and we've adopted it or adapted it to our use. Again, there was a work group of commission staff, commissioners who worked on the development of the forms, and this is the end product. And these again would be used for the first time on Saturday night. Would you like to just to go through them?
So, our main objective with the forms is to reflect our main objective in our overall procedure, our medical approach. We wanted to minimize the variability and create structure and standardization. So these forms are based on what the evaluations will look like. There's a pre-bout form which will be administered before the fight. There's a post-bout form that will occur after the bout. And then we also have a discharge and suspension form. So all these forms together will become, the narrative of what happened to the fighter along the entire, duration of the event, from pre-bout to the time that they're discharged from our care. And if you take a look at the forms, you'll notice the use of check boxes. Okay, so this will minimize, the illegibility factor, and again, hopefully standardize the approach so everyone has a similar evaluation. Is there any questions on any of the forms? There's also, if you'll notice, the last form, we are going to start to also provide a medical assessment for the referees who will be working, just to make sure that they don't have any medical issues that might complicate their health during the event, because they're also exerting themselves throughout the night. So again, just to review their medical status and minimize any unexpected health.
They've never been examined before?
Not in New York State.
The Amish has done it forever. It's good. It's good. Good idea. Thank you.
So I noticed on the combatant discharge, there's a place for the combatant to sign, right, and the manager. And then, but the physician's one is just simply for the physician, right?
Yes. The combatant doesn't get a copy of the discharge, but
Of this one.
I'm sorry. The post-bout. That's just documentation for our records.
What if the manager or the combatant requests a copy of this?
I think that's fine. I don't think it's.
Yeah, we can send us an email request,
Yeah,
and we
that's
would be able to email it to them.
The that final form, the discharge form, will be in triplicate, so they will get a copy, just to, I guess, minimize the paper burden. We only have a single copy of the post-bout, so, but I'm sure we can provide it.
Do we? I guess my question is, do we want to?
I don't think there's a problem. I mean, it's information. I mean, it's their information.
They don't generally receive their medicals.
Mm-hmm.
So if they request their medicals, we'll provide it to them. But for the most part, we have a medical storage room that boxers or combatants have never really had to maintain their own copies. If they want them, they're able to have them.
Okay.
They would have to sign a release if anyone else wanted it, like if they wanted it sent to their physician or their coach or promoter.
They
right.
Generally
So that
fill
would
out
be
the HIPAA form and the authorization release form.
okay. Designated whoever they want to share that information with. Yeah. Okay.
And were there? I know I sat in on some of the MAB meetings, but were there any major questions or issues with these forms by anybody?
Nothing. A couple of smaller issues were discussed, but nothing major.
Okay.
I'd like to thank the staff and the commissioners who worked on the development of the forms. Is there a motion to approve the forms?
Make a motion to approve the forms.
And seconded?
Seconded.
Moved by Mr. Signorelli and seconded by Judge Torres. All in favor of approving the forms for use at commission events, please say aye.
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 And opposed,
Aye.
nay. And we'll be using those forms. Thank you for that. Next item on the agenda is the discussion and approval of revised medical requirements and exams. Again, I'm going to ask Dr. Gagliardi to jump in here. A lot of what we're doing is is
Medical.
is medical,
Right.
right? And so
Okay.
this is Dr. Guy. A lot of this work was again staff who worked on and commissioners who worked on the process for the exams, and then also Dr. Gagliardi and our medical staff.
Okay, so this form is basically an outline of our, what we like to call our best practice approach, and it outlines what we do from the medical eligibility requirements of the combatants, and then it goes through all the different procedures, policies that we have in place. This specifies the duties, not the duties, but the assignments or the tasks that each physician will be responsible for. Again, it's sort of like the division of duties, so it's not as chaotic. Everyone has something to focus on. When we put all of these things together, then we have, the cumulative effort, and that's how everything gets done. But rather than guess what the other players are doing, now we have assignments, so that will ensure that everything gets done. And we're also planning meetings a couple times during the event, again, to ensure that there's communication, and if there's anything outstanding, that we address that, we assign someone to complete the task and make sure that it's completed. So you can take a look through.
So the first, this is the document entitled Medical Policies and Procedures Best Practice Approach. On the first page, the first 2 pages, you'll see the medical requirements of the commission. Those are existing requirements that have already been approved by the MAB and the commission, and this is how we, as a commission, judge the ability, preparedness of a fighter to fight here in New York. When this was presented to the MAB last week at their meeting, Dr. Noble suggested a change to the brain MRI scan, and he and Dr. Meschler requested, if you look down on that first page on the left-hand side where it says brain MRI scan, the last bullet is gradient echo GRE, and our previous policy stopped there. The 2 neurologists on the MAB recommended that we change that to include susceptibility weighted imaging, SWI, when available. And so what you have in front of you is the revised sort of requirement there for the SWI when it's available, which I guess is much more precise than in some cases than just GRE, the gradient echo. So the MAB approved that, and we've included it in here, and that's the only change that they made to the medical requirements. And then as you go through this, there's the they didn't make any other changes to this at all, but you'll see that there's I wanted to highlight a couple of things on the medical team formation, which is the 5th page in. Dr. Gagliardi has taken a very structured approach to the way the ringside physicians will work at events, and you can see how she has requirements for when they arrive and how they communicate with the referees and inspectors and so on. They will review the medical folders. There'll be the pre-fight assessment, which is the pre-bout exam. And then you'll see assignments. And the physicians will be assigned to the red corner. Some physicians will be assigned to the blue corner. And then there are 2 new physician assignments that you'll see here. One is the referee doctor, and that's the doctor who's going to be responsible for doing the pre-fight evaluations of the referees. They'll also be on hand to assist the medical team throughout the course of the fight. There's a new position established also. It's called the emergency actions doctor, and that's a doctor who is going to be responsible for an emergency. And these doctors, the referee doctor and the emergency action doctor, will sub in to do work at ringside, but their primary responsibilities during the event are for these other functions, and that's to ensure that those functions take place and we have a proper number of staff to handle our medical assignments. Was there anything else new? I mean, I know we wrote out a lot of the we wrote out the procedures, but anything else?
Nothing really new. Just sort of clarifying that at ringside when the fight's going on, one doctor in each corner will be the chief doctor in charge of that fighter if anything happens. If the fight or when the fight terminates, that doctor will follow the fighter combatant to the back to perform the post-bout assessment. So, there's structure, and when that doctor leaves to go to the back, the other doctor in that corner will be the next doctor in charge. So, in order for the fight to go on, as you know, there needs to be a doctor in each corner, ready to observe the event. So this will minimize the chance that the doctor's not there or tied up in the back with something else, because we'll be rotating.
So I'm confused now. So I see the four doctors, the red corner, blue corner, referee, and then emergency actions. Are you saying there's actually going to be 2 in each corner?
Right.
So there's 6.
Well, in the beginning, the referee doctor will be with the referees, and they'll be there to perform the exams and participate in the rules meeting with the fighters. Okay. The emergency actions doctor will meet with the EMS team, evaluate the escape route, and answer questions, set up the EMS, etc. Once the fight goes on, the referee doctor and the emergency doctor will rotate or go in one of the corners, respectively, blue or red, with the red or blue team doctor. So now we have 2 doctors in each corner, which will rotate.
So the 4.
So you got
Precisely.
4.
Okay.
Precisely.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Maybe more, but
Okay.
and hopefully not less. But in the event that there are less, then just say there's 3, then 1 doctor, or there might be a shared responsibility. So it could be to do the red corner physical, and also meet with the emergency actions with the emergency team, and then just maintain communication. And the important thing is, we're a team. So when, like I said, things aren't done or can't be done for some reason, whether it's time or there's some complication, that we'll communicate and make sure that things get done. Because the chief or the assistant chief or the assistant chief will be there to help and make sure everything's getting done, just to oversee that all these critical events are taken care of.
Any other questions? If no other questions, then can we get a motion to approve the revised medical requirements and the exam procedures as stated?
Approved.
Motion to approve by Judge Torres. Is there a second?
Second it?
Seconded by Commissioner Signorelli. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. And we'll follow those procedures starting on Saturday night. The next document in your folder is a position statement on hematuria, blood in the urine. This again was an issue that was identified in the Inspector General's report, and one of the recommendations was to put in place procedures for handling situations where a boxer, after a fight, has some apparent discolored urine, and Dr. Gagliardi has developed the recommendation that has been reviewed by the MAB and approved.
So I can summarize the document. I mean, basically, the issue with hematuria is in sports in general. It's not uncommon to find what looks like blood in the urine. We don't know if it's blood for sure unless we do special testing. But if it looks like blood, especially in line with a combat sport, it could be nothing, but you have to suspect something more serious. And there's a number of conditions which could be potentially catastrophic, like laceration of an internal organ, or some other kind of trauma. So there is no set policy or medical procedure that is recommended out in the community for these short events. So basically, not every fighter will have an emergency, all right? So we sort of have to decide which fighters or in which scenarios the fighter will require more care, okay? So basically, if you could, with time, read through the policy, it gives some medical data and some medical background. But basically, we really need to take these on a case-by-case basis, okay? The important thing is that these fighters are not cleared quickly, okay? Something like this merits follow-up, all right? So, we might recommend hydration and then check them again and then follow them serially and see how they're progressing. And based on, the medical evidence in that particular case, what we find, then we can make a recommendation accordingly. So, again, case-by-case basis is the best approach. But the important thing, again, is that they're not discharged quickly because things can change. Okay, late onset symptoms and finding is really what we're worried about.
A couple of companion pieces. Well, a companion piece to this also is that we have instructed, and as part of our new Deputy Commissioner Inspector Manual, inspectors who are taking the post-bout urine are instructed that if they see discoloration, which they think may be blood, they are to notify a physician immediately, as well as their supervisor, so that that fighter can be examined. And then what this essentially does is sets forth our procedure for handling it from the doctor's perspective. And if followed, and I sincerely hope that everyone does follow it. There's no, it should be followed. Then the fighter will get the appropriate amount of attention, and the situation will be managed. The condition will be managed, at least while the person's at the arena, and a sound decision can be made. So that's the.
And the other thing is, we also try to just keep recommending to the physicians that we're a team, and you're not there alone. You're not the only doctor there. So not all of us are urologists, so we can interact and communicate to really come up with the best medical decision rather than trying to make a decision on your own.
So the team would have a discussion after post-bout?
That will definitely occur, but if people are in different locations while the fighter is while we're waiting, like I said, the clearance wouldn't be done quickly. We might have the fighter rest and have some hydration and monitor the fighter serially. During that time, we have our two-way radios. We could call for another doctor, call for the chief, call for the assistant chief, run these kind of things by each other and not try to make the decision on your own.
What's our policy now in the pre-bout urine if they identify any sign of blood in the urine? That's my question. Because, they train all week, they train hard, and the injuries do occur.
Right.
What are we doing now with that?
I don't know. Do we have a policy?
Do they
before?
fail?
But
Obviously, that would forestall the bout if the guy's being.
Yeah, I mean,
no,
again,
what is it?
we would from moving forward, we would give the same kind of care to the fighter and make a decision based on again
Something like that.
Yeah.
Do we have anything currently that covers that topic? That's my point. It's a good topic. Same thing, pre and post.
I think that this.
And only a title bout what we do at post. I'm sorry. Only a title bout what we do at post. So we don't know the extent of all these lower end fighters, the 4, 6, 8s, and 10s.
Right.
We don't know what damages because we don't do that.
Yeah, and following the same procedure will help us to.
Do we have anything?
So.
Nothing.
So.
I will see that, thank God. But,
We should implement something. Well, now with this new venue we're jumping into, I would think it would occur.
But this doesn't specify pre or post
Well,
blood
actually,
in
it
any.
does.
Oh,
It does say.
Oh, okay.
It does
Post
say
out urine.
post-bout.
Okay, so
Post.
we can,
That's why I
we
thought
should-
maybe
yeah.
wordage. Thank you.
Yeah.
Should this be worded?
Muhammad Ali, after the first fight with Foreman, pissing blood for weeks.
Weeks.
After
Yeah.
Body
Okay.
shots he took.
So,
Good point.
should we mention, is there any reason why we shouldn't change this to just apparent blood in the urine sample of a combatant as
That's fine
opposed to
with me, yeah,
post-bout, so that this,
covers any time,
Maybe that
yeah.
should warrant more of a discussion though, because that can lead to the cancellation of a bout if it's serious enough, and post-bout, the bout has already happened, obviously, and in this particular case, pre-bout, you would need to make a decision whether or not the
Right,
combating
it's
can
gonna
continue, so that
continue.
might be something that you'd want to run by the other.
I think we have to be cautious because we don't know the reason for the blood in the urine. If he had a urinary tract infection, he could present blood in the urine, which is not going to prevent him from fighting. He's probably not going to be feeling all that well, but I don't think it would prevent him from fighting. So I think that warrants more of a discussion before any kind of decision is made to change.
all right, well, we can go back to the
There's
MAB.
something to address
We can bring it to the MAB. We can make a recommendation to the MAB if that's
Their
okay with
opinion
you.
is, most important, your opinion on
What do you-
that topic, because you're more familiar with it.
What are your thoughts, Doctor?
I mean, my thoughts, it's still taken by case. I don't think it would necessarily lead to cancellation if the guy's perfect or a woman is perfectly fine and there's no indication to stop the fight. But if they had belly pain, you know what I'm saying? So case by case, it's going to be a spectrum of possibilities. Definitely, we don't want to suggest that it would lead to disqualification, but yeah, just saying, that's my approach, my thinking. I don't think it's necessarily going to create, more disqualification than would otherwise be.
So pass on to the medical review board to critique it.
We'll ask the MAB. We have this is gonna deal with, let's just say, post-bout urine, and we will have a recommendation on.
No, he's talking about pre-bout.
I
Yeah, but they'll
understand,
have a
this one deals
conversation.
with post-bout. We will bring the issue up with the MAB, and we'll either amend this or we'll have a separate
Good point,
policy.
thank you.
I think it has to be, as you said,
just
case by
popped
case.
out.
Case basis, it has to be analyzed or considered if something's in there. So anyway, on this position statement, is there a motion to approve it?
Make a motion to approve it.
Commissioner Signorelli, seconded by Judge
good.
Torres. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, say nay. And that's approved. I just wanted to let you know that we also presented the doctors with a position statement on concussion, which had a similar red flag approach. And the doctors in the MAB had some. They had some recommendations. So we didn't include that in your packet. Not ready for approval. They didn't approve it as it was written. So we're going to go back to the MAB with some changes to that position statement on concussion and how that's handled, and then and we'll come back to the commission on that. But those are the two, concussion and hematuria, blood in the urine, were two of the issues that were identified in that IG's report from July. The next issue or item on the agenda is the policy of requiring continuing medical education for ringside physicians. Dr. Gagliardi?
Right. So this provides some guidelines for the physicians. Previously, we didn't require that a certain number of continuing medical education credits be obtained in a certain period of time. So we are recommending that every 2 years, the physician will have at least 24 of the AMA, PRA credits that the doctors get every year, but now they have the opportunity to do this over 2 years. The reason why 24 was recommended is because there is a national meeting put on by the Association of Ringside Physicians, which if you attend, you will earn 24 of these credits. So you'll fulfill this requirement. So we're also recommending that they do obtain the credits by attending that course. However, it's not a requirement because of the cost and financial burden involved. Lots of times it's in a distant location that might require air travel, hotels, conference fees. So we're recommending it, although not requiring it.
We're recommending that they attend the conference, but we're not.
Precisely.
But they will be required to do the continuing education.
Yes. Yes, and most doctors, most states have requirements that, or most boards, that you have to fulfill a certain number of credits anyway. But again, if they could achieve the credits by attending either sports medicine type CME or the combat sports type CME, then that's of course recommended.
What's the, and I know it probably varies, like you said, state by state and by your discipline, but what's a normal number of credits you would need for, like, New York?
I think, and it varies. I don't know if New York requires any. I'm not sure on that, but I think certain states have like 50 every 2 years.
50?
Yeah.
Okay. So 24 is very reasonable.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and easily obtainable.
Okay.
There are lots of free CME that you could obtain online now.
Okay.
But of course, people like to travel, and but you can get them pretty easily.
The MAB had asked us if the ringside physician symposiums that we put on were eligible for continuing medical education credits, and the answer right now is no, because the Athletic Commission is not an accredited provider. But they did ask us, and we will do it, we will look into possible accreditation in order to give CME credits for the ringside physicians who attend the medical symposiums that we put on.
Dr. Strauss actually brought it up at the last symposium. He said that he thought it was fairly feasible to get them things, so he's somebody we could always reach out to.
I did some research already with the New York Medical Society, and there's an application that's pretty straightforward. I believe we would fulfill the requirements, that we would be eligible for that. But again, there's fees associated, and it could be a little pricey depending. But.
Okay. Any other questions, comments about the continuing medical education requirement and guidelines? If not, is there a motion to approve the continuing medical education requirement for ringside physicians? Is there a motion made by Judge Torres, seconded by?
I second it.
Seconded by John Signorelli. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. And that's approved. Thank you for that.
I think
Next item is
You got another one?
Next item is the guidelines and policies regarding laceration repair. And I'm going to, again, another medical policy that comes up. I'm going to turn it over to our
So in the
Dr.
past,
Gabrielle.
physicians who had
Was it cuts in the cuts you mean in the face?
yes, lacerations or very cuts. Physicians were able or eligible to potentially repair a laceration that
Right.
might be a result of an event. Depending on the severity of the laceration, if it were appropriate, then if the physician felt comfortable and had, was in the scope of their training, then they had the opportunity to do that. Since June of 2016, the ringside physicians are employees. Well, we're employees of the state. So now that we're employees of the state, it is not a required duty in our duties. And if the physician did this extra work, they wouldn't be eligible to receive any extra compensation.
Where would anybody allow the application of sutures in the middle of a fight? I never heard of
No,
it.
not in the middle.
Afterwards.
Yeah.
Oh, post.
Right.
Post out,
Right.
and if the
Right.
combatant had stitches required, the doctor would then bill them
Right, the insurance.
previously. Now that they're
But all that
employees,
subsequent to the fight, I thought this
Right.
entailed.
no,
So
post out.
No.
So what's
So
intention?
because we discussed this at our medical symposium, and there's a lot of controversy about the issue. So for now, lacerations will not be eligible for repair, and after
The ringside
at the
physician,
event,
they gotta
at
go to the
venue.
they gotta go to the hospital.
Precisely, right. They will have to.
If someone
go out.
required 3 stitches previously, what would be the fee attached? That's my.
I mean, it
It's usually
depends
the
on.
deductible, the insurance
Yeah.
deductible. So, for example, if the insurance took out promoter took out an insurance policy where the deductible was $500, the physicians might work out a deal saying, listen, instead of just going to the deductible, give us a quarter of that or a half of that, and we won't go through the insurance. So it's usually based off whatever when they were independent
Right.
contractors.
That was their contract. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Does
now-
that mean that formally they could sew a guy up in the locker room after the fight.
Yes.
Yes, yeah, if
And-
there was,
and be compensated.
I don't see why not.
if there were a doctor,
Just a laceration.
if there was a doctor there who could do suturing, he would do it, and he or she would bring their
Right,
own
right.
equipment and supplies to do it.
Right. But no, that's.
But now they're
that's the
ringside
ban on that.
physicians, now they're employees of the
So
state,
now you gotta
rather,
take them to the hospital.
and we're not,
Okay.
they're employees of the state, and so no longer required, and it's not part of their duties to.
Well, it's not allowed for this.
So we're
That's
preventing
right.
it now.
We are, right.
Say,
We're
go ahead.
So what is the purpose, liability purposes? Or what is the purpose? Preventing them from doing it?
It's
It's not in the
It's
scope of
their-
their practice
right,
according to
and-
the job description.
and
The
they
job
won't be
description.
compensated for it. So they're saying who will pay for my supplies, who will pay for my time, that kind of thing. So, and who also will defend them if something goes wrong.
Right.
So
Because now they're state employees.
precisely, yes.
Good point.
Yeah.
So for now, there's a policy
So
that will
this
prohibit any kind of repair.
Right, this clarifies it because there were questions that came up at the ringside symposium. Some doctors wanted to continue to do it, but they wanted to. They would only do it if they got paid. It's additional. We didn't. The state it does not include it in their job description, and so it's not approved as part of their functions at this point.
I agree with it. I make a motion to accept. this policy.
Second.
Motion to move, motion to accept, and by Commissioner Signorelli, seconded by Judge Torres. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. And that's approved. Next item on your agenda is the approval of MMA gloves. As you know, the commission must approve the gloves that are used for fights, and you've done that in the past for boxing. We did that in our last meeting in August, and today we have, for the first time, a presentation of gloves for MMA, the first MMA bout. Kim?
Okay. The UFC has submitted a pair of gloves that are actually manufactured by a company called Century. They're a manufacturer of several different types of MMA gloves and boxing gloves. So they've submitted it. We've gone through our inspection process and our evaluation, and we've approved these for the event. I don't know if you guys wanted to have a look at them. Send those down. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Can you tell us what you looked at and you have your form here.
Yeah, actually, if you can hand me that form. Okay, so we look at a couple of different things right off the bat. First of all, the construction of the glove itself. So we look at anything abrasive, anything that might scratch the competitor. We also look for rigidity of the foam that makes up the covering on the knuckles. That foam also we look for being a one-piece construction. We don't like any breaks or separations in that construction or having embroidery across the top. The decal on the top being silk screened or painted is okay, provided that it is smooth on the glove. So we also look at finger holes, making sure that the finger holes they're not required to be covered, but if they're not covered, you can see that there's a binding on them. If they're not covered, they have to be constructed in such a way as to that because it's a small area and can fit inside the eye socket, so we need to be cautious that cannot scratch the competitor's eye. They have to be open palm, open thumb. That thumb, occasionally you'll see an MMA glove with a thumb piece, which is okay. However, the thumb pad and the thumb knuckle must maintain being exposed. Okay, so because in MMA,
This has no thumb.
right. Okay, so they don't always come with a thumb. You actually have that on the wrong hand, Judge. But,
This is left hand?
Yeah, that's your left hand.
Seems to be a very, it's difficult to clench the fist, it appears to me.
The
As
competitors,
opposed to a boxing glove.
right, so the competitors are wrapped inside those gloves as well, and the glove may not fit you,
Too
I think it's
small.
a small.
right.
I don't have a big hand.
Okay,
this
so
is-
we look for double closure on the wrist. We want to make sure that it is tight on the wrist so that we can protect the wrist,
Small. Oh, really?
and then
It's
do a
woman's
full
glove.
wrap with the second closure. We look at the thickness of the pad that's on top of the hand as well. Any lumps or rigidity or a lot of.
I think I asked you before, weight, they're 4 ounce and
They're
8 ounce?
between 4 and 8 ounces. Okay, the UFC uses a 6-ounce glove. These are actually
It could be
5.
between, not either or, okay.
Right.
Thanks.
Right. So the gloves that are supplied have to be within a variance of each other. So if they consider it to be a 6-ounce, 0.5 is pretty much the variance that we're looking for. So these gloves actually weigh 5.7 as opposed to being 6 ounce.
Mhm.
So it's within our tolerance.
So if I'm
range.
wearing, I think I asked you this too, if I'm wearing an extra large and it's, let's say full capacity, 8 ounce, my opponent has to wear an 8 ounce also?
Yeah, it's the
That's
same
my
as in
understanding?
boxing. Right.
The weight has to be the same,
That's correct.
but the determination is, I guess the larger glove's gonna weigh more than
Not necessarily, because of the style of these gloves. When you look at an MMA glove, I can thin this pad out a little bit and
Mhm.
spread it across the knuckles a little bit more, because we have a tolerance in the thickness of this pad as well.
Right.
So they can spread that weight, they can distribute a little bit better. In a boxing glove they can as well, but it's not difficult to have the gloves weigh the same regardless of the size. So
Good, thank you for explaining it.
you're welcome.
Thank you.
So every single fighter will be wearing exactly that glove since we're only
Yes.
seeing one set of gloves.
Correct. Century makes these gloves for the UFC, and these are the only gloves that the UFC does use for events. And the other thing that we assess is whether the gloves have been approved in any other jurisdictions. These gloves have been approved in every single jurisdiction that the UFC has been involved with. So, the larger, almost every state across the United States, and then of course across seas as well.
So our next fight that's non-UFC will have a different glove.
They will.
Okay.
We do not have, typically with boxing already has a pre-approved list because we're just beginning MMA in New York State. We didn't have any pre-approved lists. So UFC is the first one to submit these. We have had submissions from other manufacturers. However, I have not been able to approve any other gloves at this time.
Going ahead to the next event, if they were to offer those gloves, they've already been pre-approved, they could use that
Correct.
in a sense, okay,
Once they're on the list,
Good.
they're on the list.
thank you.
Okay?
Any other questions about the gloves? If not, can we get a motion to approve the MMA gloves for use this weekend?
Approved.
I second it.
Seconded by John Signorelli. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. And those gloves are approved. Next item on in your packet, you'll see the officials fee schedule, and we have an official fee schedule for boxing. Of course, it's been in use for some time, and this is the first official fee schedule that we're presenting to the commission for approval at this event and all events going forward. Kim has researched the official fees in other states, comparable size, such as California and Nevada, and has developed a fee schedule that is commensurate with what would be received by officials in other states. And Kim, if you want to go into any about the details about the difference, you'll see the two different fees.
Title bout.
Title bouts, right?
Right. So what'll happen is, say we have a fight on the card that has a purse of over $1 million. Any referee on that entire card assigned to a title fight on that card will receive the figure in brackets.
Right.
Any other referee that's assigned to work that fight that is not assigned to work a title fight will receive the other amount. Okay? So if on the total card you have a total combined purse of the two largest combinations, okay, and it doesn't exceed 500,000, okay, so the total combined, that sets the referees and judges fee scale for the entire officiating crew, okay, so you would take, again, any referee on that card, any judge on that card that is assigned to the title fight would be the fee in bracket. Again, anybody not assigned to the title fight would be the standard fee.
Good.
Okay.
Okay.
How do these compare to our boxing? Yeah.
Boxing and MMA, it's not possible primarily because of the sanctioning body pieces with boxing. It's almost impossible to have a fee schedule that meets both boxing and MMA because with mixed martial arts you don't have a sanctioning fee schedule. Okay, the promoter themselves is the
sanction.
sanctioning.
Right,
So they're
so-
the ones who hold the belts.
So still, how does it compare to what we normally pay our boxers?
Yeah, well, I think when we look at the up to probably $500,000, they're going to be really comparable. It's when we get above that, that's where the separation goes.
So what's the highest amount for a referee?
Did you say boxing's paid
Yeah, so
more?
boxing-
Boxing's paid more?
Boxing guys get paid based on a percentage of the combined purses, whereas this has a cap on it. So
Okay.
if there's a combined purse of $7 million in boxing,
Right.
it'll be a higher scale as
Higher.
opposed to this is just anything over $1 million, they get the same flat rate.
It's a different, yeah, so it's worked on a different formula.
Got it.
Yeah, boxing, and that's set in our regulations. The,
We're working on updating our boxing.
So are these numbers in line with Nevada and California?
Yes.
Exactly.
They're actually in line with pretty much every other state that has events as large as UFC events. And for the most part, for the smaller events that you would see on there, pretty much in line with everyone. Everyone's around the same.
So my next question: are they the exact same numbers as California and Nevada?
No.
no, they're not, because for one reason, Nevada and California use different approaches to how they get to that, how they get to their ultimate fee. So, for instance,
Right,
Nevada
so-
uses.
Nevada is based on the event type, okay? Because the UFC themselves, one promotion company that has several different types of events. They would have a pay-per-view event versus a fight night event versus they just have several different, and I'm going to call them levels of events. So what we have coming up this weekend is their premium series. It's a 205 series that is considered the title fight events. So then our Albany show is what we consider a fight night series. So that's a different level of events. Okay. So again, going back to that, Nevada bases it on event type. We base it on purse amount. Okay. So with California, now California does it. They separate the title versus the venue size. Okay, so we have a difficult time doing it based on the venue size, just because of the types of venues that we have here in New York State. So we kind of evaluated it from so many different perspectives and figured that going by the purse amount is probably the best way to get an accurate and appropriate fee for our officials.
Okay, so I actually still have some questions, because if we're creating new policy here, right? And I really want to make sure. I don't know who is involved with you, Kim, in determining this, but why are we capping? Or do Nevada and California cap?
It's industry standard. Everybody does. Yeah.
Everyone caps.
Yeah. Everyone.
So the real difference now you're saying between those other two states is the venue size?
No, I said California bases it on their venue size. So they would do anything under 5,000 is one. Anything under 5,000 seat venue is one figure. Anything over is another figure. What is separate from that is whether it's a title fight or a non-championship bout. So they have kind of a couple of different ways they do theirs. Where Nevada does it based on event type. Okay, so they classify an event. So a UFC Fight Night series is classified as this level. So that's what those officials get paid.
Right. And we're doing it on purse.
We're doing it on purse, yes.
Why are we doing it on purse?
Because I think it's a bit more definitive, based on, because I can have a promoter do a fight in a 5,000 seat or I'm going to say a 6,500 seat venue that only sells the first 8 rows of seats. Okay, so by doing it by a venue size, I now require that promoter to pay an exorbitant fee for his officials that he really shouldn't be paying for.
Okay.
Okay, so I tried to meet middle of the road kind of all the way around.
Who else does it by purse? What other commissions?
Boxing is primarily done by purse.
But
Now, with mixed martial arts, it's not typically done by purse. I'm finding that much easier to deal with. I used to do it by purse in my old capacity, but I think are pretty much the forerunner doing it by purse with mixed martial arts.
Is it necessary to have the physicians on it? They're our
The only
employees.
reason-
Are they being paid through the promoters?
Right, so the only reason we did keep the promoters on there is because this is a document that will
physicians.
go... I'm sorry.
Go ahead, no, go ahead.
Physicians on there. So this is a document that's going to go to the promoters so that they will know how much they are required to pay the officials ahead of time.
And the
Okay.
physicians, because they reimburse the state.
Right. So if you,
They're paid through us, but the reimbursement, thank you,
Yeah.
that's
and
why.
if you look at the notes in the bottom, it does
Mhm.
clarify for the physicians and how they're supposed to handle the physicians' fees.
Yes. Otherwise, you're right, it doesn't.
Doesn't make
Yeah,
sense, but thank
physicians,
you.
that's
All right.
Thank you.
Any other questions, indeed?
No, I'm
Finita la comedia or what? This is the last one?
No, we've got a couple of other things.
I don't know, I'm a little concerned. I'm a little concerned creating policy like this, but no one else does it. When no one else does it, like on purses, and that this is, are we gonna be, what's the public gonna think of this? What
We've
are other
worked-
people in MMA gonna think about it?
we've talked-
Yeah, what's our
Yep,
process?
well, you can talk about your outreach, Kim. I mean, Kim has been in touch with the Association of Boxing Commissions about this approach. She's run it by California, Nevada. I mean, it's the UFC.
Supported by some of the officials as well, I know.
But
And what was the feedback?
Everybody thought it was great. Everybody said it looks great, looks appropriate for, basically fight size, because the purse is really gonna determine really what size or what type of an event it is, because they're not gonna have $1 million fighter at a smaller show, right? So, right. Right, because a promoter who's going to try to save money by doing it in a hotel or a smaller venue certainly isn't going to bring in $1 million fighter.
Right. So let's take the haters out there. How are we going to get criticized on this? What are they going to say?
I don't know that we would get any negative feedback from any type of haters, and I think I say that because this affects the officials, and if the officials are comfortable with this and they're happy with these types of figures, which is what they're getting in the industry already, I don't know where the haters would come in. It wouldn't matter to the public what the officials are being paid.
Everything too much.
It's what the official agrees to work for. It's like me or you. If I go and apply for a job and somebody wants to hire me for a job, my first question is, okay, how much are you paying me? I either agree to work for that amount or I don't.
But I guess I just want to, when creating something new I want to be prepared for any negative backlash, right? So there's got to be something negative someone's going to say is, why are you doing it this way? No one else does it this way. There's a cap. I just want to understand what potential negatives are out there.
I can't.
I mean, if you think about who's the parties or the stakeholders that are going to be interested here, it's pretty much the promoters, because they have to pay the fees, and you have the officials themselves. And the general public, as Kim said, is not really going to even be necessarily aware. It's public information. I guess it's public information because it was open meetings and so on. But I don't think it's something that they're going to be that concerned about. So it's really the promoters and the officials. And we've reached out to the promoters and we've reached out to the officials, and they're comfortable with using purse size because it ends up being an amount that is commensurate to what's used in the other large states.
One other thing I think too that we should point out is this is a minimum fee schedule. This is a minimum. This is not.
Oh, it doesn't say. So that doesn't say it on
It
this.
says minimum?
Doesn't say minimum
It
anywhere.
is a minimum fee schedule.
So that should be noted on this.
If a promoter wants to pay more, obviously, and in fact the UFC does.
They pay more than this.
They do.
So I
What's the
think
reason?
that should be on here, that this is minimum.
Okay. We can revise that if it's not on there.
I don't see it, is it?
Is it now?
I thought that it wasn't.
I mean, it might be in the small print.
To read it.
I don't have a copy of it here.
And they get additional monies for travel and meal?
Yes.
And is that also a minimum?
I'm sorry.
Are the travel minimum or the travel flat fee?
The travel is only a minimum
Mileage.
when an official lives within 100 miles of
Right.
here. Okay, after 100 miles, there is no minimum.
Wait, say that again?
If they live within 100 miles of the venue, then
They get
there is
nothing.
a set minimum. There's
No,
a
they
set
get the
fee.
100.
That's what they're required to be reimbursed. If they live more than 100 miles, then there is no minimum. Then it's
50-50.
The promotion has to pay for their travel and get
That
them
same
here,
amount,
put
that
them in a
50-50.
hotel room and all of that type of.
Right. Cancellation notice also. Good. Minimum amount.
All right.
That would
Okay,
be-
Tony.
We'll adjust the title of this to include minimum.
Can,
Second.
wait, 1 second. Can we just, sorry, Judge, I just want to make sure we're getting this right. I would just love to make sure that, I don't know if you've had conversations with the promoters and with the reps, but can we just make sure it's documented, please? If we're questioned on it? If they were just conversations? Okay, now I'm ready.
All right. Any other questions on the MMA officials minimum fee schedule for MMA? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All right. Thank you. That's approved. Next item on our agenda is old business. Does anybody have any old business to bring up to the commission? No. New business. We have a couple of items on here for discussion, and then there's one additional item that was brought to our attention just before the meeting that isn't on the agenda. I'd like to address that one first. It's the approval of scales. Part 210.27 of our regulations requires that the commission approve in advance of a weigh-in the scales that will be used at the weigh-in. Typically, the commission brings its own scale to weigh-ins, and that's the scale that's used, and so that is already pre-approved by the commission. The UFC has a scale available for Friday's weigh-in, and they've asked if we would consider approving their scale for use at the weigh-in. The scale is of a similar make and model as the one that we use. It was calibrated as recently as October 29th of this year, and Eric and Kim have seen the scale. And do you want to say anything about the scale that you saw?
Nothing other than, I certainly agree with its use. I'm very comfortable using their scale. There was no issues with it. It's almost identical to ours, like you said. It's been calibrated within the last 2 weeks. I have absolutely no issue with using it. In fact, I would almost appreciate using it because the UFC, the way they do their weigh-ins, they begin that weigh-in process, the Tuesday before the event. So they use these scales, and all their fighters use these scales. They weigh them in on Tuesday, again on Thursday, again on Friday morning before they even see us. So they're making sure that these guys are on weight, and they're using their own scales.
Have we ever done this in the past? Is this going to open up the door? It's going to say, I want to use this scale, I want to use that scale. Have we done this in the past here?
No, but I don't think it's something that we should shy away from. I think that as long as we set
That's it. We
standards
haven't done
where
it in the
it's
past,
calibrated,
right?
then
No.
we've never
Thanks.
even
All right.
been asked to,
Thank you.
or at least not in the last 5 years.
You've been.
Okay.
Is there any risk to the commission if, say, the scale is not properly calibrated, or?
Yeah, I was going to say, look at the date.
The date's scratched out, like
appreciated that. Would you have the 16 scratched in like
You
that?
say a little fugazi. It's a
That
little.
doesn't
Erase them off.
really
and
make
then
me
the
comfortable that it's
calibration.
actually calibrated on that date.
But everyone will weigh the same way. That's
Everyone is
in a sense.
That's
They're
right.
gonna.
They're all, it's an even playing field.
I mean, if you saw that as a
But what's the
legal
reason not to
document,
use
would you
ours?
question that?
It's just a courtesy. That
They asked if
it's
it
not
was
a legal
okay,
document.
because that's what they've been using all
Well, I'm
Right.
just saying,
but yeah.
it makes me a little
It's just
nervous.
Why don't we
photo.
just use
Yeah.
what we've been in the past? Safeguard ourselves. Why change policy?
It's up to the commission. You can, if you're not comfortable using another scale, you can decide to not use the other scale.
Any thoughts?
All right, do we have any other proof other than this on what day it was calibrated?
There's
I
que-
don't like the scratched out 16.
We can
It's-
probably
Pass
ask
that
them
down to
for,
Kim
see, I
and
don't know if they'll have, they're from Nevada.
No, I mean, seriously, it is November. It's not like people make that mistake in January. It's a new year.
It's possible, I can certainly ask
I
them.
don't see the reason for it.
I mean, there's no detriment to using our
Right.
scale, right?
No, absolutely not. It's an even playing field for everyone, so it doesn't.
Okay. So we'll use our scale at the event. Okay.
Easy.
All right. So then, moving on to new business, there are a couple of things that we've been working on, and I wanted to put them in the format of policy proposals for your future consideration, or call them policies under development. And the idea is, on the left-hand side of your packet, you'll see some of these. The first item is recommended, and these aren't recommended, this is just for discussion purposes right now. There still needs to be some work done on these, but there are 3 different medical requirements to be licensed in New York that we'd like the Commission at some point to consider adjusting. And they have to deal with our hematology tests, our requirements for high-risk competitors, and our foreign, and how we handle foreign medical reports. Dr. G?
Sure. So the first item on the list there is hematology testing. Currently, a requirement for medical eligibility is to look at coagulation studies, the PT, PTT, INR. We're starting to discuss with MAB, we'd like to replace that with a CBC and a platelet count. One of the issues with the previous test indicated there is, typically these kind of tests are used to evaluate someone who is on some kind of anticoagulant medication like Coumadin or heparin. Yes, they can pick up bleeding disorders, but the problem comes when we get results. And the question now is, well, what are our cutoffs? At what point? Yes, there's a range of normal, and outside of that is considered abnormal. But how much outside of the normal will we tolerate? Okay, and there's no guideline for us when we're considering, is this person eligible to participate in combat sports? So we don't really have answers. And based on that, I can't justify performing that test and requiring it. From what I understand, when we have had abnormals in the past, they've been required to undergo expensive and invasive hematology testing, which most of the time ended up coming back normal anyway. So that's the impetus for suggesting the replacement with the CBC platelet count, which can also pick up other problems with anemia and bleeding disorder, which could be, even a post-infectious cause.
So that's your recommendation?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, it's just something that we're going to come back. It's for discussion purposes right now, but that's something that you will be seeing in the future. High-risk competitor.
Yes. For high-risk competitor, we already have some recommendations on additional testing that's required for a high-risk competitor, and you could see some of the requirements that would fulfill the definition of what a high-risk competitor is. Basically, this is sort of an update of our requirements, and it reflects the position statement that's published and put out by the Association of Ringside Physicians. So again, it's more of an update to be more complete and comprehensive and up to date with the evolution of medicine. So
what about a pregnant boxer? Is a
not
pregnant boxer
allowed to
at all?
No.
Not at any. Not at.
No.
Period.
Period. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Hopkins is 52, and he's having a big bout in a couple of weeks.
But not a baby.
52.
Yeah.
The reason for 6
They're not.
consecutive losses. What is that? Why does that put them in high combat? What if they just lost on points? The fighter that won the last 6 consecutive fights could have taken a beating during a fight, and he's not a high risk. I mean, what's the reason to throw that in the 6 losses?
I believe that 6 consecutive losses is already in our policy. So
Is it?
It's not a
I
ban,
believe
it's
so,
just
yeah.
heightened
Yeah.
screening.
Yeah.
Is it?
That's
Yeah.
all it is,
Yeah.
heightened screening.
Yeah.
Look
Check
into
them
that.
out.
Well, and that sort of reflects what we said about MMA as well, because there are other ways to lose in MMA. So that was one of our discussions, that it needs to be, a little bit sport specific too.
Good.
So again, this is a work in progress. Something will come back.
Any
to
thoughts
you.
that you have about it, please pass them along as we go through. We'll bring this up at a future meeting. And then the last
Right.
is regards foreign
Foreign
medical
medicals.
reports.
So basically, this really just creates some guideline for the fighter, for the combatant who is going to submit foreign medicals or medicals that are presented in a foreign language. We want to make sure that we do the proper evaluation, and assess the information, and it's understood. Sometimes they don't have it they submit it in the original language. We struggle to translate it. In the event, so anyway, this is a recommendation that they do submit the test assessment in English. And in the event that they can't, we ask that they provide at least contact information for the doctor or provider. If for some reason they cannot help us, we can also reach out to the Department of State Language representative. Yeah, the access coordinator. So again, just to have something in writing that helps to guide those foreign or those combatants that will get their medicals from a foreign entity or from a foreign language.
So those are medical requirements in order to get licensed by the Commission, as distinguished from medical policies. And the next group of items you'll see on the agenda, the drug testing policy, the NSAID policy, and the guidelines regarding skin lesions, are more policies on how we operate as a Commission with regard to these medical issues. The drug testing policy is something that is really due for updating. For one reason, there are a number of states that allow therapeutic use exemptions for certain drugs, and we do not. We do not have a therapeutic use exemption in New York. We'd like to explore that possibility. Additionally, we've talked about the whole concept of whether or not we should do pre-bout and post-bout urine for title fights. Do we need both? And this question has come up in the past, and something that we are exploring. In addition, we're exploring the idea of having possibly an outside entity come in and do the tests, as opposed to having Commission staff do the tests, take the urine. Having an outside entity do the test, and they would be responsible for them doing, it would be a lab. They would then be responsible for delivering the items back to the specimens back to the lab, and there would be no issue with chain of custody with the specimens. Was there anything else that for any performance-enhancing drugs? We were going to look at the performance-enhancing drug policies that we have. So we wanted to just let you know that this is something that we're very interested in. I know we as a state are very interested in having a very strong policies against performance-enhancing drugs, so we'll be looking at those. Anything else?
No.
So that's for future consideration. And then the NSAID policy, you can explain that.
Currently, we have a policy that states that the fighter should not take any kind of NSAID drugs 7 days prior to the competition. And we've been really looking at that because there's no evidence-based data to support that timeline, and it doesn't specify the dose. It doesn't specify which NSAID, because they all have different half-lives. And this has come up and it's been a problem in the past. So what we want to do is refine the guideline and really have it make sense. We want to be able to justify it. It's just saying 7 days prior to the event, it's not good enough. So I've given the board some research papers to look at and get a better idea of what's happening, on a metabolic level, and figure out what time course makes more sense. And again, I think it also should be drug specific because the half-lives are different. So anyway, again, a work in progress, but that's
So you're suggesting to make it a longer time or shorter
Not
time?
necessarily.
Depending on
It depends
what
on the drug.
There you
Right,
go.
right. And then it also, for instance, we need to have a dose criterion as well. If someone takes one pill, which isn't even a full dose in a certain period of time before an event, then is that grounds for disqualification? And we need to be able to support that and not, like I say, just base it on arbitrary data or anecdotal findings. We need to justify what we're requiring.
So we'll be going back to the MAB for their advice. We've asked the MAB for their advice on these items as well. And the last item regards skin lesions, which is an issue that has, I don't know if the Commission or the MAB has dealt with this issue in the past, but it is something that is certainly prevalent in contact sports like wrestling and MMA. And Doctor, would you like to explain?
Yeah,
what that
so
is?
basically we need to develop a policy when we do find a skin lesion. Most of the time they are infectious. Questions come up as, well, we need to be able to not only identify it and properly diagnose it prior to the event, but then also determine the risk not only to the other fighters. It's more of an issue in, like you said, wrestling and MMA because it's more intimate. There's a lot more skin-to-skin contact. So we have to look at the surface area of the skin affected. You have to look at, again, overall risk assessment. I'll make it brief. Overall risk assessment of, again, not only to the other fighter, but then how about the referee and how about everyone else who's going to get in the ring? We try to properly disinfect the contact areas, but, is that really feasible? And, again, just assess overall risk. The NCAA has a guideline and an extensive policy which outlines eligibility of a competitor who does have a skin lesion. It identifies specific conditions, the treatment that would allow them to compete, the stage of healing of the lesion. But again, and there's sort of a gray area for us because as ringside physicians, we're not providing treatment or giving medical advice. We're just determining medical fitness. So again, there's sort of this gray area, and we need to determine a policy that fits in with our duties legally and also helps us to better make decisions regarding, disqualifications. And again, to be able to justify them if we do make those disqualifications. So again, a work in progress.
Questions about the skin lesion guidelines or proposed or to be proposed guidelines? No? Then the only other item I had on new business, and then I'll open it up to others, is the Weill Cornell head trauma study that's going on right now. Dr. Sethi had alerted us to this study of brain trauma or brain injury, traumatic brain injury that's being conducted by Weill Cornell, and he suggested that we approach the MAB for their advice on how the commission may be involved, not necessarily with the study itself, but he wanted to first of all make the commission aware, the MAB aware of the study, and also determine whether or not the commission should publicize the study for Cornell Weill, because as you can see in the memo that I wrote to the MAB, one of the groups of that is being studied is professional boxers and MMA fighters who are suspected of having CTE. And of course, we are interested in doing all we can to help identify traumatic brain injury or CTE and help to mitigate the causes of it. So one suggestion we had for the MAB, for instance, was just to make this available on our website, on the medical page of the website. And as you can see, there's a flyer attached that is probably being publicized around the hospital or the medical school. And so one thought was, we could make it available on our website. Another thought was we could actually send it by email to promoters so that they could let their fighters know about the study. There's no cost to the study. They make money in the study, and
Could we make it in a form of a handout at the weigh-ins? This way the fighters have it rather than the promoter forgetting to give it to the fighter.
that's another great idea.
They would-
Another way to approach this. The MAB, particularly Dr. Noble at the MAB, had some concerns because the board that approves these studies has already prescribed the approach to publicize it, and he wants to make sure that the principal investigators have the approval of the IRB in order to do any other publication. So the flyer has been approved, and you can see the stamp on it. So what the MAB has requested is that we reach out, and we'll do this through Dr. Sethi, we reach out to the principal investigators and ask them if the IRB, if there's any problem with us doing that, either and that's another option, making it available on our website, sending it to promoters, or making it available to fighters at weigh-ins. Those are all good things. We also talked about any potential legal ramifications of doing that. And as of now, we don't see any. Basically just publicizing it. We wouldn't be, obviously not requiring, we wouldn't be encouraging, we're just simply sharing information at this point. So we're going to look into, have Dr. Sethi actually look into whether or not this would be approved. Any of these options, and I'll mention the idea of actually handing out the flyer.
It's like we advise them on the healthcare, how to get healthcare too. So
Yep.
Very
These are
good stuff.
These are much more controlled. I guess these studies are a lot more controlled, and so we don't want to run afoul of any of the rules that Weill Cornell has. So just wanted to bring it to your attention and ask if you have any other advice on that. Or
My only question would be: Are there other hospitals and studies and educational institutions that are doing this? And if we put this out, does it look like we're partners with Cornell?
That's a good question, and I would say that we would put out all the studies that were. I mean, I personally don't see any reason why, as long as it would be approved by the board that approves these things at the particular college or institution. I don't see any reason why we should make them all available,
Right.
and not just one.
Right.
But that is a good question, and it could look like we're
Partners with Cornell.
partners with Cornell and actually promoting
Yeah.
the Cornell study,
Right.
which.
Part of the problem with medical research is, like, we're definitely interested in contributing the data that we might collect. The problem is you need an IRB, you need approval, it needs to be properly set up and looked over and monitored. So if we can promote or send out flyers or put it on our website for all the different studies, then I think even if we had a page or a tab that said research, ongoing research, and we could have a little disclaimer that says, we're in no way partners with Cornell or any of the.
We're not encouraging anyone to make profit on it. It's a free study.
Exactly,
That's sort of
right.
I don't see.
For the most part, unless it's listed, these are single site or single center studies. Sometimes we'll do collaborative things, but then it gets more complicated, and the data is a little bit more difficult to manage. So most of the time there will be single studies, and these, Cornell's pretty big and established, so I think they're doing it on their own. But I'm sure other centers are doing similar studies on brain trauma or trauma in general that will also help us, reflect back then on these policies that we're trying to make or clarify and make more understandable and reflect evidence-based medicine. So I think it's all, part of the.
Yeah. Again, my concern is just if we do Cornell and Cornell only, and then what is our what do our doctors look like? How many are from Cornell? And we start to look at that, and
Yeah.
I don't know. I just want to make sure that if there's others out there, we do the same for them.
Mm-hmm. So that's those are the last items. Does anybody else have any new business to bring before the commission? If not, I would just like to ask if we could if we could look at our calendars possibly for the next meeting. I'm looking at the next event, MMA event, is December 9th in Albany, and we'd like to have a meeting before December 9th. And I'm looking at 2 Wednesdays. November 30th would be the Wednesday after Thanksgiving, and then the Wednesday the 7th. Wednesday the 7th might be difficult for us because we might be in Albany by then. So earlier in the week would be better. But let me ask, how is November 30th?
Wait, is it why is it necessary to have a meeting so quickly? Do we have stuff we have?
We
to
may have to approve another set of gloves. Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
We may have to approve.
So November 30th.
Well, I'm asking if November
What day
30th.
of the week is that?
That's a Wednesday.
Sounds okay.
Well, the gloves, Tony, we won't need to approve another set of gloves for the UFC. Because once these are
That's a
UFC
UFC
event.
That's a UFC
they're
event.
going to go on
Yeah.
our list.
Okay, that I'm sorry. You're absolutely right. I failed to take note. That's a UFC event. We do have a World Series of Fighting event
New Year's Eve.
on New Year's Eve, so we'll definitely have to have another meeting.
Well, that sounds good, November 30th.
So if I can't be here in person at that point.
November
I can do
30th
it
is
on the
not
phone.
good. Okay.
No.
No, we want, you need to be here in person. So
Do I need to legally be here in person?
you need to be observed and heard. So we need to we can do it by FaceTime. We can do it.
I
So
like
the
it by
December
FaceTime.
9th isn't
Okay.
an issue. We can go further into the the 31st
We
event.
could,
Right? So don't worry about that.
we
Right.
could go into as long, I would, you know what, but I'd
Unless
like to
something
keep
occurred.
it, I don't know if something's gonna
If
come up
something comes.
before the 9th.
But if it's just the glove issue,
We don't have to do it for the gloves.
We could do it later
Later
for
in
the
December.
other
Good
20.
idea.
Yeah, we could do it
And
later.
Dee Dee can.
Yeah, I'm just saying,
Okay.
I'm
Yes.
you guys, next week I'm getting my knee replaced.
Okay,
So it's going to be difficult. Travel will be difficult over the next 6 weeks.
Okay.
Sounds like that.
So what about December 9th? Is that it?
no, December 9th is the next show in Albany. So why don't we do this? Why don't I get back in touch with you and
Yeah, figure it out.
think about after Thanksgiving what dates you may or may not be available, and I may get back to you sooner rather than later if there's anything that comes up that needs to be approved before the event on December 9th.
Sure.
And if not, then the next event is December 31st, New Year's Eve. New Year's Eve. New Year's Eve at Madison Square Garden.
All right.
What's that?
Madison Square Garden.
What? What's going on?
MMA. Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn the
A
meeting.
second.
And
Be there
second,
at 3 o'clock.
Commissioner Signorelli makes the motion.
Second.
Seconded by Indidi Massey. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye opposed, and we are adjourned. Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.